Hello, Facebook. It's Reid Mahalka from readaboutsex.com.
And co-creation from co-creation.com. That's K-O-E creation.com. And that's a tall ship, and I'm kind of freaking out about it.
So we're talking about growing up in a poly family, but now when you saw the ship, I'm worried that you might have been raised by pirates.
That is partially true. Actually, it all ties in. So
We're going to walk this way and have the ship in the background.
great. We're taking a stroll.
So as you sign in, say hi and where you're from, and if you grew up, what kind of family did you grow up in? I grew up in a fucked up family, but it was awesome.
A nuclear family as well.
Nuclear family. That went nuclear.
That went nuclear.
With all the fallout. Oh yeah. Ooh, that's good.
That's good.
Okay, so talk about what it was like growing up in a poly family.
Of pirates.
Of pirates.
Okay, so in the early 90s, my family were medieval reenactors.
Ren Fair?
Ren Fair, Pirate Fair, Fairy Fairs, and still are, right? So, pirate ship. And they were doing non-monogamy before there was actually a word for it, because they just had a whole group of friends who would talk about who's in relationship with who and their feelings and their statuses and all of that sort of stuff. And then in the mid-90s, the word polyamory came around, and they're like, oh my God, that's us.
We have a word for it, friend.
Exactly. So I was born, a couple of non-bio siblings of mine were born, and we created a family unit together. And one of the...
Okay, so wait, you're going fast now. What does non-bio sibling mean? So,
it's a sibling that is... Great.
More boats.
More boats. It is a sibling that does not share your biology.
Okay.
So this could also be like if you have step siblings, those are siblings, but they're not biological.
Okay.
Right?
Or adopted or whatever. Okay,
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. Just checking.
Yep. So in that family unit, I have three moms, one bio dad, and my biological uncle who married one of my moms. So he's also like in my unit, but he's not my dad. It's different.
Yeah.
They all chose intentional familyhood, and there are a couple of things that they used to create that instead of just being really good friends. So things like we were always on each other's emergency contact list at school, which was really difficult for the school.
Yeah, but even now, like you have like your aunties and your uncles who aren't really your aunties and your uncles. That kind of made sense in my world.
Right.
But these were like actually your other parents.
Yeah, they were my other parents.
Okay.
There was a lot of sharing of responsibility and a lot of like dealing with bureaucracy, like the school thing. And I considered them my parents, right? And so it's the way that like you framework to your kids how the family is structured.
Sure.
I know who my biological parents are. Not all poly children do, and that's totally fine. So it really depends on like how the family wants to structure the family and then portray it to the children. I'm also really grateful that my family was out to me throughout my whole childhood, and personally, I think that is the most authentic way to do it, way to like engage in your polyamory and be a parent, because your kids are going to find out anyway. And I think it's better and more integritous to be out and like bring your children into that and teach them certain lessons about like how society might view you versus the support that you can receive from your family.
And what do you think, have you talked to a lot of kids who grew up in families that weren't out? I mean, because this is also kind of the out kind of thing is kind of similar-ish to parents who are kinky, who can't be out to their kids or choose not to be. So like how, in talking to other, because you had that experience, but in talking to people who grew up in other situations, how did it fare for them?
That's actually one of the reasons that I am such a big proponent of it, is I have many friends, both older and younger than myself, I'm 27, who had parents who were living some kind of like alternative lifestyle and didn't tell them about it, and they lost a lot of respect for their parents.
Trekkies. They were Trekkies and they couldn't tell their kids.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, but they ended up losing a lot of respect for their parents because there was something going on. They felt the tension within their parents and the fear. And so it was kind of like, why are you lying to me? It creates division. And like, absolutely. I also have friends where their families were torn apart because CPS got involved. parents split up. One of the parents went like real straight-laced and was ashamed of the life that they had been leading up to that point, called CPS and created a whole bunch of like really nastiness.
So Child Protective Services.
Thank you. Yeah, Child Protective Services.
Which again, like just bad divorces, non-kinky and non-poly people call in the Child Protective Services and stuff.
Yeah.
I have other questions, but
okay.
keep going.
But
Leave your questions too. We might not be able to read them in the sunlight, but we can answer them later.
I will answer them in my own Facebook Live later.
Ooh. Fancy.
Yeah. So like there creates a lot of division if you're not out to your children. But that being said, if you have an incredibly pragmatic reason for not being out to your children, keep your children safe. Keep your family safe.
Yeah. Here's my question. Where do parents get to have a private life? Like, let's say, like, where's the line for, yes, we're poly, but kids, this is not your business. Like, this is adult business. Like, how would you advise people, like, where to draw the line for themselves so that they're also role modeling for the kids you get to have privacy too?
Awesome. So you know what you just described?
What?
Boundary setting!
Wow. Look at that. Look at me.
So, it is an act of boundary setting. It is and something that my parents used is called age-appropriate, like, information. And so if I would say, like, why is so-and-so staying over? And they would say, well, because we're having a sleepover, just like you have sleepovers with your friends. Can I stay in the bed with you? No, you cannot, but you can come knock on the door in the morning and then we can all cuddle together. And when I knocked on the door, it would give them the opportunity to put their pajamas on, get ready, and then we could all have cuddles.
Wow.
Right? So there were like...
I like the sleepover thing. This is a good fix for a lot of, for my poly friends who are like, what do we do when we have kids? You just tell them it's like having sleepovers.
You are having a sleepover.
Yeah.
So it's just a lot about framing. Another thing that my parents and I did was any question that we had, we would bring to them. So that the parents didn't have to assume what we were ready for information-wise. So if I came up and I was like, good example, when I was 9, I was really curious about what the hell testicles were. Because I couldn't figure out why they were useful.
I'm still curious.
Right,
I'm still wondering why they're useful. Anyone leave a comment. Why are testicles useful?
Right. But I came up to my mom and asked about that. And she was like, okay, she got a sense that at 9 years old, I was curious about like reproduction and anatomy and things like that. And so she was able to have that conversation with me where she may or may not have thought I was ready for that as an adolescent.
How did they teach you to come to them with questions? Like, is that just...
It was something that was instilled throughout my life. Like, any question that you have, feel free to come to me. And when you are ready, feel free to come to me. So the funny thing was, I would psych myself out about what they would think of a question that I had. So, but that's sort of like, it's a dynamic that we created. So the parents were always like, if you have a question, don't be afraid. Like, I won't judge questions that you have. And then they followed through. They didn't freak out when I came to them about really kinky stuff, or I came to them with like wanting to experiment with whatever, or I came to them and I said, hey, I crashed the car. I never felt the need to lie to my parents
because they'd never lied to you.
Ring a ding. Unless I created it, right?
Okay. Well, I mean, kids lie. People get scared or get surprised, or they test out lying.
Yeah, exactly. That was another thing. But the thing was, that was the other piece. Whatever you did, if you lied about it, the punishment would be worse for lying about it than whatever it was that you did. So it also instilled the dynamic of, we trust each other, we are honest with each other, we're open with our communication.
Got it. What so now you work with families about raising kids and in non-traditional styles, right? Because how do you identify?
Reunion.
Like what? Because you said pirate fairy gatherings, and I'm like, really? There are pirate fairy gatherings?
There are. You should come.
So I've been living in ignorance all these years, but like, so I say like I'm a queer polyamorous slut.
Oh yeah.
Like, so how would what would be your identifiers for this video? Because maybe they change.
So I myself am a pansexual, queer, polyamorous slut, sex positive person, and I'm a poly kid. That's what I call myself. Is I'm a kid who was raised poly. Other people I've heard like alt kids, also queer spawn.
Queer spawn.
Queer spawn, the spawn of queer people. I'm also
this
queer
week
spawn.
on Queer Spawn.
Oh, queer spawn. Oh,
I called dibs on that.
Okay.
I called dibs on that TV show. Queer Spawn.
Oh man. Yeah. So.
And then there's the spin-off Ren Spawn. And
Ren Spawn.
Pirate Spawn.
Oh my God. They tried to actually make that a couple years ago. It was pretty disastrous.
Pirate kids.
Yeah.
So other questions. As somebody who travels a fair bit.
Yes.
And talks to a lot of other families and kids of families. For where you grew up and the kind of family dynamic you grew up in, do you find that kids and parents battle with different things if they're from different parts of the country, different cultures, different races, different economic statuses? Like how does all that seem to weave in or not weave in? Because in some places we talk about like polyamory, like the poly conferences kind of are pretty white. And so I'm just kind of curious for you around that stuff.
Oh, for sure. I grew up in Seattle area, so incredibly white poly community. And as I've traveled there, like the pragmatics of being out or not tend to be a lot more stringent in other places. Like I've done, or how much community is around surrounding the family. So if you have other even polyamorous people in your life, there's a little bit more of a network, whereas in places that tend to be a little more rural,
super conservative.
Yeah, super conservative. Even not necessarily super conservative, but just more rural areas. There's just less community, and so there's less of a safety net for you as a parent to find support, for your kids to have other kids or even other poly role models.
Yeah.
Things of that nature. And I think that there's also the sense of like culturally, how is the culture that you exist in with trust? Because there's a lot of trust. And like, were you role modeled in your communities that relationships are open about their communication, relationships are about trust?
So if the community that you're growing up in is all secretive and everybody's whispering behind each other's backs and there's a lot of like PTA backstabbing and stuff like that, it would feel really different than if there's a community that you're growing up in where the PTA is practicing nonviolent communication and transparency and all that.
Exactly. So it's just a little bit harder to grasp these concepts and believe that they work because what you've seen throughout your life is different. And also, you can create what you want. That's one of the things I always talk about is like your relationships are built by you and you have the opportunity to build whatever you feel will work best for you. And like Reid said, that may change. So try on some of these concepts, and if it ends up that like your kids aren't coming to you with questions, then maybe you work out a different dynamic with them. Yeah.
And where can people find you?
Co-creation online, KOE creation and co-creation.com.
Cool. And then for me, I guess if you're looking for poly resources, it'd be readaboutsex.com / and I think this is right, poly-resources, and then you can get some resources and stuff like that, hence poly resources. All right, awesome, thank you. And then, we're 30 days out from Sex Geek Summer Camp. You were at the first Sex Geek Summer.
I was at the very first one.
What, if anyone's considering, you're on the fence, and it's readaboutsex.com / camp FAQ, what would you tell somebody who's considering coming but is hesitating as a camper?
If you don't feel like you are put together enough as an educator, go anyway. You will, it's sort of like, it takes you from the ground level of like, I might want to be an educator. It takes you from that idea and shows you the path. You don't have to have a website. You don't have to have you don't have to be the projected idea of who you should be as an educator. You just get to go and be yourself and that's enough.
And I know that you've been a camp counselor at a queer camp for youth. How do we stack up as a camp? I mean, we don't have trust falls and rope courses and stuff.
No, I'm saying
Where's
my archery?
There's no
where's
archery.
my boating?
I know there's no pirates. But other than that, how do we stand up as a camp, as a summer camp?
Oh, it's
adults?
awesome. It's so much fun. There's a swimming hole. The food's great. There's a campfire with s'mores. There's a talent show. There's still a talent show, right?
Talent show, yeah.
Talent
Always.
show is
That's
the
how we end.
best.
We end strong.
Oh, yeah. No,
Okay.
it's super fun.
All right, thanks.
Mhm.
All right, I'll put the links when I get home, and we'll look at questions. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Co.
Thanks.
And there's your pirate ship.
Ha ha! Yar!
Yarr.